Hello, welcome in and welcome back. My name is Dustin. This is a podcast called Boy Meets Therapy. And here we are blending clinical research with real conversations about vulnerability, relationships, friendship, identity, and culture, with a special emphasis on the LGBTQ plus community, the alphabet soup. A lot of our episodes feature solo insights like this one and in-depth interviews with licensed professionals who share their experience and their humanity. This episode is a part 2 continuation of the part 1 episode that was the struggle to find or sustain a relationship. I don't even know what my title was. I just had to pull it up. I got a lot going on, y'all. I got a lot of stuff going on. And so with that, I'm going to tell you, this episode is going to be a continuation, like I said, but we are moving from awareness into action. So the first episode was about why. Why are these things happening? I gave you a bunch of data. I gave you a bunch of information as to why dating as a queer person is such a struggle. It can be so challenging, and not even just finding a relationship, but sustaining a relationship can be really, really challenging for a lot of us. So I talked about why in the first episode. So if I'm going to give you all of these things on why, right? I gave you basically not a sob story, but I gave you a lot of stuff that might have been, I hope it wasn't discouraging. I hope it was more like explanative. Is that a word? I don't know. More explaining kind of what was going on and helping you understand that it's not just you. It's not just you. And so now I have to do my due diligence, right? And I have to give you a part 2. And the part 2 is going to be about learning how to relate differently. So, if part 1 was about understanding the forces that make love feel complicated, then part 2 is going to be about how to actually move forward. So once you understand the context, it becomes possible to work with it instead of just kind of getting eaten up by it. So this episode, as a disclaimer, is not about fixing yourself. It is about relating with more clarity and intention. It is about learning what safety feels like, where your patterns come from, and how to practice connection in ways that support who you are today, not who you had to be years ago. And I want to acknowledge something about that, because I used to say this all the time. There are certain situations in which I'm like, oh, my 12-year-old self would be so proud of me right now, right? But then there are other situations where I'm like, oh, I've really let my 12-year-old self down. And I really need us, I'm going to try first to stop doing that. Because it's cool to acknowledge, like, yeah, my 12-year-old self would be proud of me, and that I found helpful and beneficial. But I also, when it comes to the negative stuff, I have to stop considering what, like, my 12-year-old child brain was, like, kind of going through at that time compared to me now as an adult. I hope that makes sense. I probably didn't even have to say that. But yeah, sometimes I'm like, oh, I used to do this all the time. My 12-year-old self would be so disappointed in me. Like, I blah, 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 blah. And it's like, dude, your 12-year-old self was a 12-year-old child. They didn't know what was going on. And they only knew it was right in front of them. And so I have to say that to myself sometimes. So I'm going to say that to you. Anywhoozles. So we're going to look at a lot of stuff about attachment and development, and really going to be looking into an action phase. And I want to say this first. So sometimes people go into therapy, or people go into, situations, and they want to know why. They're like, why is this happening? Why do I think this way? Or they go on this deep dive to find some kind of like miraculous piece of information that is going to tell them exactly why they are doing things or behaving in a way that they don't like. Sometimes that is not the best way to approach it. Okay. Sometimes we don't really need to know why. Sometimes the issue is severe enough to where we're like, okay, I'm not going to harp on the why. And instead, I'm just going to focus on what I can actually do to change this, or to begin kind of moving in a direction that's different than what I did before. And then after we've kind of moved in that direction, then we can kind of look back and look at some of the why and understand where a lot of this comes from. But I would say, yeah, it's the same thing in substance use treatment. A lot of times in substance use treatment, it's like, okay, let's figure out how we can get you emotionally regulated. Let's figure out how we can help you to maybe come off of the substance. What can we do in that aspect? And it's not necessarily, someone's coming in on detox and it's like, let's talk about your family, which we do talk about, but sometimes it's like, let's do some action and then we can go back forward to the why. And I say that because I deviated from that a little bit in this situation because I figured I had to get you invested. I had to get you invested with the why. So then you're going to come back and be like, well, what do I do now? It's kind of salesy, I know, but I'm not selling you anything because, again, I haven't made any money off of this. I'm doing this out of the kindness of my own little Georgia heart. And yeah, so I say that because I want to tell you, if you are kind of having, some experiences that are uncomfortable or whatever, blah, 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 and you keep asking yourself, why? I don't want you to get drugged down by the why. I don't want the why to be the end all be all, because I'm going to tell you what's going to happen. You're going to figure out the why, and then you're still going to have the problem, and you're just going to know why it's happening, right? If my car isn't working, the first thing I don't say, and I run out of gas on the side of the highway, or my car stops working on the side of the highway, I'm not going to be like, well, we need to figure out exactly what happened. No, I'm going to be like, get me off the fucking highway. Okay. So anyway, that was my little spiel about that I didn't have to give you, but I did. So let's talk about some stuff. We got some things to get into today about, what do we do to move forward? So we know that it's so if you come to me, you say, I'm struggling to find or sustain a relationship, blah, 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 blah. I give you all this information. What do I do now? Let's talk about what we do now. So we cannot talk about that without talking about attachment and queer development. So I talk about attachment theory all the time. If you ever go to therapy, or if you're ever in a psychology class, or you're ever in a mental health, whatever thing, they're going to talk to you about attachment theory. And the goal of attachment, right, is we want to form a secure attachment. That's the attachment style that we want. That is the goal. And so when we look at that, what is secure attachment? Secure attachment is feeling safe and comfortable in our relationships, is feeling heard and understood. We can go on about that. Google it if you don't know. But secure attachment, that's the goal. So attachment theory helps us explain how our early experiences shape the way that we connect as adults. That's what we kind of do with attachment theory. But for queer people, attachment does not form in a vacuum. And I don't know if you've ever noticed this. So I put this script together. If you've ever noticed this, I never even noticed it until the other day. You see this in the corner? That is my vacuum. And if you go back and watch an episode, I never even realized this. So this is what I do. My vacuum is normally like up against like over here, like because it charges. It's fancy. It's the fancy one. It charges in the corner. So what I do when I record is I put it down. I never noticed this. Somebody messaged me after watching a podcast episode and said, is that a vacuum? Is that a vacuum on your floor? And I said, yes, it is. And so if you've never noticed it, it's right there. There it is. If you're listening, then you'll just have to trust me instead of watching. So when I put vacuum into this script, I was like, well, maybe I can shout out the vacuum because it's always there. It's always there. I just don't like point it out. And you probably never noticed it because most of the time I'm like sitting in front of it, or maybe you're looking at, I don't know. Anyway, so there's some tea. So anyway, this is oh my God, Dustin, I need to get it together because I have been digressing so much. I've been so off topic already. So for queer people, and we have a lot to cover, attachment does not form in a vacuum. It forms in a world that often treated our identity as something to hide. So here's a little bit of research from Shepler and Costa from 2021 that found that insecure attachment and minority stress interact in same-sex couples. So in other words, early relational wounds combine with societal pressure to create patterns that feel like an instinct for a lot of us. So what does moving forward look like? So I'm going to give you some like practical guidance on, and I want you to utilize this in any way that it comes up for you. And also, I always push this. Think about things that are unconscious. If you are having patterns or you're seeing things that are being repetitive, there's something unconscious and you can't figure it out. There's something unconscious that's going on. So I want you to consider whatever I talk about, how it shows up for you, and how it might show up for you unconsciously. So let's talk about, some practical guidance with these things. So one of the things you can do is name your reactions before you respond. So this is especially helpful as a lot of us talk over text a lot or messaging, and we might have a strong emotional reaction. Let's pause when we get that, right? And let's think, what am I actually feeling? Am I angry? Am I embarrassed? Am I sad? Like, what's going on? And is this coming from the present or is this coming from the past? Is something that this person said, am I angry at something that this person said specifically, or did this person say something that is bringing up something from the past that might be unresolved, or that's reminding me of something else? I don't know. Naming things gives your nervous system a moment to kind of slow down. Okay. And one of the things that I always really, really push is naming vulnerability, because I know a lot of people, a lot of queer people really struggle with vulnerability, like deep vulnerability in relationships. And so one of the things that I like to do in my own relationships is I like to name it. I'll say, like, I'm going to be vulnerable in just a moment. Like, this is going to be vulnerable for me. And that might be weird to like introduce into your like daily vocabulary or language. But once you start doing it, I have friends and family and people now that I'm like, I'm going to be vulnerable. It's just kind of like incorporated into like how I speak. And it's really been helpful for me to name vulnerable emotions that I feel uncomfortable sharing, right? Like if I want to tell someone like I like you, like I'm into you, that might be vulnerable for me. And I might want to like keep it cool and maybe not say that. Or maybe I'm afraid they're going to reject me, or maybe I'm afraid they don't like me back or whatever. So I just name it. I'm like, I'm going to say something like kind of vulnerable. Like, is that cool? And then I'm going to say something like, I am like kind of into you. Like I really feel you. Like I like you. And that can open up kind of like a conversation. And that might encourage other people to do it as well. I've had people in my life now that are like, I'm going to be vulnerable. And I'm like, okay, here we go. Here we go. So I would also acknowledge building trust through small repeated signals. So a lot of times queer people, when we're going into relationships, we want instant closeness because of scarcity. Like we want to know very quickly, is this going to be a long-term relationship? Is this going to be X, Y, and Z? And a lot of those things we just don't know, right? Like we cannot determine that for every single person that we get into relationships with. Some people, it's just not, they may ghost or whatever. So one of the things that might be really helpful for this is small repeated signals. So a sustainable trust comes from consistency, not intensity. Okay. You want to look for patterns with your partner or people that you're talking to as follow through. That's a huge one. If someone says something like, yeah, we should do this, and they actually follow through with it, that's a good sign. Also, I would encourage you to become that person. Don't say to someone like, yeah, no, seriously, this is what happens. No, seriously, we should do lunch. Like, really, we should do lunch. Like, yeah, oh my God, I'm going to text you. Blah, blah, blah. Never hear from them again. Stop doing that. Stop doing that. Be serious. Text them. Hit them up a week later. And some people might be surprised. But if you don't mean it, don't say it. So follow through is really, really important when it comes to building trust, not just with us, with ourselves, but with other people. So I would encourage you to practice that back and forth, especially if you're looking to kind of like really form a relationship with somebody. Steady communication, and this is a huge one: repair after conflict. So there's a thing in couples therapy that it talks about like you have to know how to fight with each other. And it's not necessarily knowing how to fight with each other. It's knowing how to resolve things with each other. Because I will tell you, people, you can become so much closer with someone during the repair phase or during a resolution phase where both of you are like, I said this or I said that. Obviously we need to be cautious of what we're saying in the moment. And that's when we go back up and say and name our reactions. But those repair moments are going to be really, really, really important. So also I would encourage you, if you grew up, you need to start practicing regulation. And this isn't for everybody. Some people can really regulate, but if you grew up self-regulating alone, like by yourself, a lot of us, that looks in a lot of different ways. That can look like drinking, that can look like smoking, that can look like whatever, that can look like disassociating, that can look like a lot of things. It can look like a lot of different reactions. So it might be strange for you if you grew up doing this to allow someone else to soothe you. And I want to slow down for just a second. Co-regulation is simply just letting someone be a part of your emotional process. Examples include asking for reassurance directly or clarifying when you need a bit of space without withdrawing. That's what a lot of this stuff looks like. Okay. If you're feeling insecure about a relationship where you feel like I really like this person, but we haven't talked in a couple of days, talk to them, tell them, say what's going on. Yeah, you have to be able to really reach out to another person if you expect to be in an intimate relationship with them, a healthy intimate relationship with them. And again, attachment is not about being perfect. It could be about building safety little by little. You don't have, no one's going to ask you to wake up and have this perfect, whatever, because it doesn't work that way. But micro vulnerability, that's a good one that I love. Showing up, asking for help when you need it, especially if you're hyper independent, it is something that's going to be really important to you, particularly when working with a partner. And when a partner asks these things of you, it's important to show up. So, late relational learning. A lot of LGBT people are dating with fewer early life experiences. And I talked about this in the last, in part one. There's some research from Frost in 2017. He found that people who came out earlier reported greater relational competence later in life. So if you dated later in secret or in fear, you might still be learning skills that straight peers practiced in adolescence. And this is not a failure. This is not to punish someone for coming out later, because there's no, proper time to come out. It's always when people are ready for it and they feel confident and they're ready to do this. But that is something to acknowledge, that it's something to acknowledge when we're looking to form relationships, is kind of, do I have experience even doing this? And if we do it in secret, that's not the same as experiences with kind of like dating, with open dating. So here's some practical guidance for that. So let's practice gentle transparency. Okay. Say what you feel without jumping ahead to predictions or pressure. And what does that look like? It looks like saying, I enjoy spending time with you and I want to keep getting to know you. That's a simple one. And that is something that you can preface with, I'm going to be vulnerable. If you feel uncomfortable saying it, or you want to feel cool, or you're trying to keep your cool, right? You're like, I want to keep my cool. I don't want to give them too much, blah, blah, blah. Just preface it. I'm going to be like, can I be like a little vulnerable with you? Cause like, I'm having fun. Like I kind of want to like say something, and they're probably going to be like, yeah, of course, go ahead. And then you're going to say something like, I enjoy spending time with you and I want to keep getting to know you. Is that okay that I said that? That's what we're kind of talking about here. And also, you could say something like, I am interested and it feels right for me to kind of go slower right now. That's something you can say too. Okay, relational repair. You have to learn the art of it, okay? So research shows that repair actually matters more than compatibility. Okay? Okay. So a simple repair process when you encounter conflict or when there's a misunderstanding looks like this. Steal this, take this, use it, whatever. Because a lot of people they really struggle with, this weird thing happened, so I'm just never going to talk to them again. You don't have to do that. Let's do these three things. Acknowledge the impact. Acknowledge what happened. Acknowledge the impact of it. This was hurtful, or I see that was hurtful for you. Clarify your intentions. What were you intending? Now, I want to acknowledge something else. Just because you didn't intend for something to be harmful or hurtful doesn't mean that it wasn't. So this is not an opportunity. Clarifying intentions is not an opportunity for you to give some kind of excuse. It's an opportunity for you to say, this is what I actually meant. And it might be helpful to say, I recognize like how I was misled in that moment. Number 3, reconnecting with a small gesture. What can you do or say to say, you know what, I didn't mean what I said. I didn't want it to come off that way. And, maybe can I like take you to lunch or something? Or like, can I bring you like a little, I don't know. You get creative here, okay? I can't give you all the fucking answers. Not that I'm giving you answers, but like, you got to play, okay? And sometimes you got to pay to play. Anyway, okay. This is a huge one. Huge. Do not assume that your partner has learned these skills. If you are a queer person, gay person, whatever you are, and you don't know these things, you cannot assume that your partner knows them. You are probably and more than likely both learning this at the same time. Some people might be putting in more work than others, but both of you are kind of coming together with a lot of times a similar deck of cards, right? So do not assume that your partner learned these skills. Talk about things many straight people take for granted. like public affection. What does that feel like for you? I know for me, I was on a date with a guy. This was probably like 5 years ago. We were at the aquarium and I said something sweet, or I don't know what I did. Probably something completely adorable. Um no. I don't even remember what happened. But basically he like reached in and like kissed me. Like in the middle of like the aquarium with like all these people around, and I pulled back and I immediately was like, whoa. Like I felt, and it wasn't because he like violated some boundary by like kissing me or something. It was because we were in such a public place and I was like, what the fuck? So that's something to talk about with a partner, you know? And I feel like in that interaction, that was a good opportunity where I can kind of discuss like reconciliation, because I like pulled back and he told me later, he was like, I really felt rejected in that moment. And I was like, I'm really sorry. It was not my intention to make you feel rejected. I just, that was kind of something that was really nerve wracking for me. So I would acknowledge that when it comes to just something, but that was just a little small example. What words matter to you? How does trauma influence your communication? These are things to talk about with a partner, you know, like something that your partner is going to want to know is something I might say, right? Or somebody might say is, yeah, you know, I didn't hear from you for a couple hours. So I kind of was thinking, oh my God, do they not like me? There might be some rejection kind of coming up, especially from someone who's a queer person who has experienced a lot of rejection in their life, and especially around their identity. And something that might be helpful to say, hey, you know, when you kind of disappear for a couple hours, I don't know, it just makes me feel a little rejected. Now, I'm not saying to say that you need to be in contact with somebody all the time. I'm just giving this as a quick example of, you know, and then hopefully the response might be not defensive, right? You don't want the response to be, well, that's not what I meant. I was working, blah, blah, blah. That's not what you want. What you want is, and this goes, you know, this, you can say this, or if you're this person, think about it. Yeah, what you might want to say is, oh, that wasn't my intention. I'm sorry. I was a little busy, you know, maybe reaffirming. And some people are really big words of affirmation people. So some people really need you to tell them, hey, I need to know where we stand. So connection can grow when both people in the relationship understand the context that you're coming from. Again, people are going to come from a variety of different backgrounds. I might be someone who is really, really comfortable with emotional closeness, and I might be dating someone who's not. So there's some incongruency there, right? But that doesn't mean that things can't work. That just means that we're coming from different places and we probably need to be a little more communicative about it. And if anything, that can invite conversation about, well, tell me about why, you know, you say that it's really difficult for you to feel vulnerable. Can we talk about that? Do you feel comfortable sharing a little bit more about that? That might be a moment for you to kind of lean into that. So think about those things. Let's talk about hyperindependence. Let's talk about it. And the myth of self-sufficiency. So hyperindependence is really common amongst queer people. It often comes from needing to protect yourself emotionally or physically growing up. So Bessel van der Kolk from 2014 explains that trauma can produce avoidance of dependency, and independence becomes a shield. That very same shield can block closeness later on. And here's some practical guidance if you feel like you were really struggling with hyperindependence. And again, I would encourage you to think about, you know, unconsciously, I would encourage you to think about, am I hyperindependent? Independence is a good thing, right? Like we don't want you to not be independent. But when we say things like, no, I don't need help, I could do it myself. Or when we say things like, you know, I'm not going to communicate to my partner that I'm feeling kind of bad because like I don't want to bother them with it. That is kind of a hyper independence. That's kind of like, no, I could deal with this on my own. And the point of a relationship is to feel connected and to feel intimate and to feel vulnerable. And so we're going to have to like break that shield down just a teeny tiny little bit. So here's some practical guidance. Build relational tolerance by letting someone support you in low stakes ways. This can be a really easy way to get into this, because if we are somebody who really struggles with asking for help, it's just simply not going to be effective for you to then say, in this relationship, I'm going to ask for help with everything. It's not going to feel natural. It's going to be weird, and it's not going to stick. So let's start with like some low stakes ways to do it. So this can look like, can you text me when you get home? Personally, I hate when people say this. This is my hyper independence coming up. I hate when people say this because my first thought is, no, I'm a fucking adult. I'm not going to text you when I get home. I'll be fine. But That's my hyper independence. I get like a physical reaction when people say that to me, like, text me when you get home. No, I'm not going to text you when I get home. I'm an adult. I'll be fine. But this is what I say to myself, and this is what I say to you. It's not about that. It's about a simple way of communicating and saying, yep, I'm home. Okay, good. It's good to know. It's not even necessarily about someone trying to take care of you. It's just simply someone wanting to acknowledge, okay, you got it home, you're home, whatever. Saying something like, can you remind me of our plan tomorrow? That's something that is building relational tolerance by letting someone support you in a way that is low stakes. It is really low stakes for me to say, I'm home. And it might not even carry a super deep meaning, but it's a really low stake way and me allowing someone to support me and to check in with them and be like, yeah, I made it home. One thing that I also would like, this is another piece of advice. You don't have to do anything. I wouldn't like you to do anything. You do whatever you want. Share needs without apologizing. Okay. Share needs without apologizing. I need a little bit of reassurance today. I need a little space to think, but I'm not shutting down. That's something, right? If again, like that situation I mentioned earlier, haven't heard from you in a couple hours. Is everything okay? That might be a good response to say, hey, I just need a little space to think. I'm not shutting down. I think that's a simple, really easy way to kind of share a need without needing to apologize, because you don't have to apologize for sharing needs. Yeah, so let's also talk about identifying your exit strategies. So queer people often use subtle exits like humor, busyness, overworking, or pretending not to care. Your goal is to notice the difference, notice the exit, pause, and choose differently, even by a small degree. Okay? Just a small degree. Think about that. Autonomy does not disappear when you lean on someone, okay? It expands. It expands. So, emotional literacy and missing relational models. So, Levitt in 2016, they described something called narrative scarcity. The lack of queer relational role models. Many LGBTQ plus adults enter relationships with emotional maps that do not fit their lived realities. When no one modeled healthy queer love, emotional literacy often becomes something learned through practice, not observation. So, what's some practical guidance for this? Because if we're not seeing this displayed very often, we're going to have to what do I do? So I would use your internal weather report. Okay. Before reacting, I want you to ask yourself, and again, and I would also acknowledge, if you're not able to stop and ask yourself these things, you're not regulating, right? We need to do some emotional regulation. And so if you have a reaction, you want to ask yourself, what am I feeling right now? What does this remind me of? How old do I feel in this moment? What do I really need? These are some things that can turn emotional chaos into emotional clarity. And I don't want you to get ahead of yourself. If you find yourself having really, really strong reactions to things to where you're unable, you just act, we need to practice some emotional regulation before we can start kind of taking an internal weather report, right? Because in this moment, we're skipping the weather report. We're just going straight to reaction. And we want to get to a point to where we can think before we react sometimes. And it's also okay to feel a strong emotion and say, I need a moment. Give me a moment. Use specific emotional language. So expand your emotional vocabulary. Use words like overwhelmed, hopeful, uncertain, guarded, triggered. These can give your partner information that they can then respond to. Okay. One of the big things that we can see working with couples is someone not being able to communicate how they feel. This isn't uncommon. And it's probably happened to you, whether you're the one that's unable or you have a partner that's unable to communicate. Literally look up a feelings wheel. Google it. When I was in my internship and I had therapy clients, I would say, Google the feelings wheel. Because what I'm hearing from you is you say, I'm aggravated. I need more than that. What are you aggravated about? What's the feeling? Is it more than aggravation? Is it anger? Is it what's coming up? And I would literally say, pull out your phone and pull up the feelings wheel and go through the feelings wheel and pick how you're feeling. Communicate to me how you're feeling. Do that. Do it. Talk to your partner about it. Say, I heard some crazy guy on a podcast that said that this was a good idea. Just do it. And honestly, you'd be amazed at how much better you communicate when you're given different words, especially when you're in a really, really like emotional state. And sometimes it's really difficult for you to pull words. It might be easier for you to look at them and say that one, that one, that one, that one, to obviously tell your partner. So we need to also normalize pacing differences, because some queer people open up fast because they spent years hiding. Others open up slowly because closeness feels really, really risky. One pace is not better than the other. Okay. Both of them need patience. You got to have patience. I hate to say it, like, we as queer people are a lot of times coming from a lot of different experiences and a lot of different emotional states, a lot of different levels of comfortability with closeness. There's a lot of things going on. We could sit here and bitch about it, but that's just how it is. So we have to really acknowledge it and say, what are we going to do about it? Okay. This is earlier when I said, what are we going to do about it versus the why? That's when the what are we going to do about it is more important than the why. Okay. Freedom, non-monogamy, relational clarity. We got to talk about non-monogamy, right? And there is a big heated debate in the community about monogamy versus non-monogamy. Let's just say what's real. Non-monogamy has really deep roots in queer culture. For a lot of people, it is an expression of identity, is an expression of freedom. And there's actually some research from 2012. Connolly found that consensually non-monogamous relationships can be just as satisfying as monogamous ones when communication is clear. The problem is not necessarily the structure when it comes to this, it's the motive. And let me say this before you fucking come for me. I'm not sitting here saying if you're a queer person, you have to be in a non-monogamous relationship. You have to have 7 partners. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is, if you make the choice that a monogamous relationship is the best fit for you, then that's something that you're going to have to communicate and be open about with your partner. And same thing with non-monogamous relationships. You're going to have to really, really communicate this. So I want to ask you a couple of different things, and this is not in one way or another. Ask yourself why you want a particular structure. Is this desire coming from curiosity, expansion, avoidance, or fear? Are you leaning towards monogamy, or are you leaning towards non-monogamy because of any of these things? Avoidance, fear, curiosity. Where is it coming into play? Are you leaning into non-monogamy because you are able to practice some sense of avoidance in some way? I don't know. Are you leaning into monogamy because you're able to practice avoidance in some way? I don't know. Just ask yourself what is going on for you and what works for you and your partner. Make agreements, not assumptions. There is no universal template for open relationships, okay? Create rules based on actual needs, not the community norms. Do it how you want and check in often. Healthy open relationships adapt over time. So checking in keeps the relationship grounded, not reactive. And I want you to consider a couple of things too, because I think this is, in the last episode, we talked a little bit about the dating pool being kind of small. So I want to acknowledge something, because I think that we might be rejecting people too quickly. So if you are someone who says a monogamous relationship is really, really important to me, right? And you go on a date with someone, or the topic comes up and they say, I don't know, my previous relationships have been open and that's what I've done before, and I really liked that. I want you to do something that might be kind of difficult. Do not immediately dismiss this person. And I want to say this for non-monogamous to monogamous people as well. If you are a person who is non-monogamous and you think, you know what, I am for sure that a non-monogamous relationship is the best thing that works for me, and you go on a date with someone who's like, well, I think I kind of prefer monogamy, have more conversations about it. There is no universal rule. We make up the rules. Have a conversation about it. I would not just simply dismiss somebody because of this, because you might be missing out on a connection or a relationship and a dynamic that might actually work for the both of you. You just don't know. Now, if you're sitting on both sides of the fence, right? If you are someone who is like, I am for sure, I am going to have a non-monogamous relationship, and you're someone who is for sure, I want to have a monogamous relationship, you're probably not going to go on a date or be compatible with someone who is on the exact opposite end of that, right? But most people aren't one thing or another. Most people aren't strictly this or strictly that. So there's nuance, and people are different, right? people have different needs and wants, and everybody. So I would encourage you to not just very quickly dismiss someone, and do not create this. I think rigidity is the enemy of queer relationships and queer people in general. Actually, a lot of people, that sometimes there is this rigidity that is, I hold these beliefs, no one is going to shake them, no one is going to blah, 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 blah. This is where I stand. I get that when it comes to things like human rights, and, I understand that. But I think that there are some things that we need to simply just like chill about, okay? One excuse, this is a silly one, is these pineapple versus non-pineapple on pizza people. I personally don't give a fuck. But it's kind of like, this reaction that you get when someone's like, "Do you put pineapple on a pizza?" And they're like, "Ew, no, that's disgusting." It's just like, okay, like, let's bring it down. It's not that serious. So, while monogamy and non-monogamy are serious things in a relationship, I would ask you to bring some nuance into that when it comes to a partner. And do not just immediately dismiss someone because they don't have the same feelings about you with that. It doesn't make you a good or a bad person because X, Y, and Z, right? Like we're people. We are multidimensional, complicated people. We cannot put these extremely rigid expectations on each other. It's just not going to work. Okay. So intersectionality and unique relational paths. We talked a little bit about intersectionality in episode 1, but we have to bring this up. Queer people of color, disabled queer people, and trans and non-binary, and I can't fucking read, y'all. I am really struggling to read these scripts. And I wrote them. What? Anyway. Queer people of color, disabled queer people, and trans and non-binary individuals face individual layers of bias in dating. So, okay, let's talk about a quick study. Balsam in 2011 found that compounded discrimination leads to greater loneliness and self-esteem. So let's talk about a couple of things. I want to bring a comparison in for you really, really quickly. So there is an extensive amount of research that shows that when women are happier, more successful, and do better, everybody does better, including men. So this is something that's really, really important when we talk about a simple topic such as, a complicated, simple topic such as equal rights for women, right? I think pretty much everyone listening to this podcast can agree we're in support of that. So I want to kind of say something in related to this other study related to that. So when we look at women succeeding and performing and women's mental health, how it impacts everybody overall, we can say the same thing when it comes to clinical research about queer people of color and queer people who have who have more intersectional identities than, let's just say it, I'm going to say it, than white queer people or white gay men or white lesbians. Like we have to acknowledge when everybody in the community, including people of color, disabled queer people, transgender nonconforming people, when they do better, we all do better. And I'm saying that to tell you, this is not this is not the part of the episode where the white gay person gets to say, "Oh, well, intersectionality, queer people of color, that doesn't really impact me." Yes, the fuck it does. Yes, it does. So I want to just acknowledge that and bring that in here of those two things. It's because there is this argument, I think, a lot amongst like more of the general population, right? That's like men have to have this understanding that when women do better, they do better as well. It's the same thing. Okay? When queer people of color, disabled queer people, gender nonconforming people, trans people, when they do better, the whole community does better. Okay? I'm not just talking out of my ass. Look it up. So here is some practical guidance when it comes to kind of intersectionality. Okay? Release the pressure to date like everyone else. Your timeline and your experiences count, even if they do not match what you see in queer spaces, which, let's just say it, I'm not going to be nervous to say it. There is I'm talking specifically about the white gay man, right? And obviously I am a white gay man. So I'm like not going to pretend like I'm not a part of that group. But yeah, a lot of people of color that are queer in the community feel left out because they see these, the 12 white men with the six packs in a picture. Yeah. So I would say to these groups, like your timeline, your personal experiences count, even if they don't match what you see in wider queer spaces. So name the bias without internalizing it. If someone treats you as less desirable because of race, body, gender, or disability, the issue is theirs. This is cultural conditioning. Okay, this is not a personal truth. And I want to acknowledge something. A lot of times when I don't want to say that I'm speaking on behalf of people of color. I don't want to say that I am speaking to people of color and saying, people of color, this is what you have to do. Obviously, as a white gay man, like that's not really my place to do. But I felt like this was important to include in here. Yeah, seek partners and communities that affirm your whole identity. Validation from people who understand your lived experience strengthens emotional safety and relationship stability. I would acknowledge those things. Again, I'm going to do a wider episode later on about this. I want to try to get another another clinician on to really talk deeper about intersectionality in the queer community, because obviously I don't want to sit here as a white gay man and give you a fucking lecture on intersectionality, because that would be fucking tone deaf. Anyway, yeah. So community belonging as relational support. Okay. We got like 2 more sections. If you're still with me, let me hear you say, "Hey, Miss Carter." I always go country. I always fucking go country. I don't know why. We're almost there. Community belonging as relational support. Okay. So I referenced the study in the last one. Feinstein in 2018 found that social support buffers the effects of minority stress on relationship satisfaction. So this means that your friends and your chosen family directly support your romantic relationships. I'm going to say a couple of things and then I'm going to say something else. Okay. Practical guidance with this. Do not make your partner your entire emotional support system. I don't know who needs to hear this. Do not make your I'm going to say it again. I don't know who needs to hear this. Do not make your partner your entire emotional support system. They cannot do that. They do not have the power to do it. They just don't. When a partner becomes the only container for stress, fear, or insecurity, the relationship is extremely fragile. Build a circle of mirrors. Not literal mirrors, you vain bitch. But friends who reflect your worth, your strengths, and your identity can help stabilize your self-image. So they can make romantic relationships feel a lot less like lifeboats, okay? And let your community teach you things that partners cannot. Some needs are best held by friends. Some lessons come from peers. This balance protects relationships from becoming overburdened. And I'm going to say this as well. Your partner is not going to fit in every single aspect. There are needs that your partner is not going to meet. If you're expecting that, some people get into relationships with their best friends and it works. That's not everyone. Some people get into relationships and they might think this person wouldn't be my best friend, but they are the best partner for me. So you also have emotional needs and support that you're going to have to get met. So I want you to ask before you go seriously looking to form an intimate relationship, are these needs being met with my community or the people around me? If not, do not utilize a relationship to try to find all these things. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. It's too much stress and pressure on a relationship, and it's too much pressure on a partner. Your partner might not always be the funniest person in the world. You can have a friend who is the funniest person you know. You can have a friend who you feel like I can say absolutely anything to. That you can get that need met in a friend. Don't put all this stuff compounded on a partner. It's not fair to you. It's not fair to them. Okay, this is the final segment. The final countdown. This is the final segment. Redefine relational success. So traditional success stories, when I say traditional, I mean heteronormative cisgender, focus on marriage, longevity, or partnership status. So while a lot of those things are really important to queer people as well, obviously, there are different markers that might matter more. Success in a relationship can look like feeling safe, feeling respected, honest communication, the ability to repair, shared growth. Queer people have always rewritten relationship scripts. We have always done things differently. This is an invitation for you to keep doing that with intention. Okay. So I want to kind of close this up by saying that relating differently is not about never getting triggered by something or bothered by something. It is about recognizing what happens inside you, understanding where it came from, and choosing responses that match the life that you want now. So a lot of these habits that you formed to protect yourself were really, really useful and helpful at the time, but you are not living in a lot of those conditions anymore. You are allowed to revise your relational patterns. You are allowed to choose clarity over fear and connection over old defenses. Okay. So we talked about a lot of stuff. I talked a lot. Normally I don't want to stop talking, but I really want to shut the fuck up. Okay. So I want to say, if there is something that I talked about that you're unclear on or you're unsure of, I write a blog about every episode. Okay. So on the blog, a lot of these topics are going to be included. If you want to fact check me, I am going to include the studies at the bottom, which I do. boymeanstherapy.com. There is a blog thing. I don't know I think it's boymeanstherapy.com/blog. Anyway, you could just go to boymeanstherapy.com. It's very blue. It's very purple. It's blurple. There are blogs written about these topics. You can go back. You can pick ones you want. If you don't want to listen to a full episode, you could just read the blog. It's all there. It's all free. It's all available to you. Yeah. So you can do that if you want. You can share it. The only thing I ask is that maybe you share this with a friend, or you rate it 5 stars, or you subscribe, whatever. Do that stuff. I hate asking that stuff because it feels like I'm soliciting something. But I have to, because that's how content works. And you fucking know that. You know I have to say it. So part 3 is going to explore what is not a healthy relationship, and probably what is a healthy relationship. I wanted to do a whole episode that focused on just what is not. But it's probably important to talk about what is and what isn't, right? Because I've given you the why, and I've given you kind of like what to do now. And so now we have to talk about, what does it look like to have a healthy relationship? What does it look like to have an unhealthy relationship? You need to know these things, because I want every queer person to be successful, and I want us to date. And again, we are influencing the next generation of queer people. These examples that we don't have, we are literally going to become. So we have to create good examples for future generations. I do think we have a responsibility to do that. So with that, I'm going to leave you now. And I thank you for listening. If you made it this far, I really, really, really appreciate it. Thank you for the support. It means a lot. I am Dustin. This is a podcast called Boy Meets Therapy. Thank you for listening. Take what you need and leave the rest. If you didn't agree with everything that I said, that's fine. I wasn't frozen. I just stopped for a second. Okay, that's all I have. Thank you. Bye.